Chair, and welcome to, I'll set my timer to about 10 again, is it? 10, thanks. If you're around long enough, history repeats itself, and I worked in Albert Reynolds' government in '92, so we had the devaluation, and there was precisely what you spoke about there. There was assistance for industry, and eventually devaluation happened, but I mean, we had inflation, or in interest rates, I remember, of 15, 16%. Leaves everything that's happening today to some degree in looking mild in comparison, but a scheme for business came in there, and it was not just, wasn't loans, there was grant aid. I'm going to repeat a point I made to this. So there's been 4 contributors today, and they've been really interesting. Neri, you're the only ones who mentioned the war as the backdrop in your opening remarks, and I'm going to repeat this because I really feel it's really important how energy has been weaponised as part of this process. The reason we are in the position we're in is because Russia invaded Ukraine. And if there is any disconnect between the public understanding of that and what the public is experiencing and what we're going to ask the public to endure in coming months, that's not a good thing. For the European Union. You know, President Putin's, one of his primary objectives has been for a long time to destabilise the European Union. So any loss of will in the face of the arduous circumstances and the trying period that we're going to face into plays into his hands. So I'm disappointed in 3 of the 4 presentations today. They present the problem as though, you know, this is what's happening in the world economically without, particularly in the European Union, particularly in Ireland, without rooting its fundamental cause. And there's other allied causes, but its fundamental cause is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, particularly when it comes to rising energy costs. There's a couple of points I want to raise in relation to the IBEC presentation, and I love you're straight up with the title for Director of Lobbying and Influence. Nobody's hiding behind anything in IBEC. It's kind of just straight up in our face, and it's refreshing. Just a couple of points I'd like to tease out. You've fleshed out a little bit about the emergency supports. In terms of labour costs, you say government policy in the labour market is loading significant cost pressure onto businesses, particularly SMEs. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. So we look at the individual measures that are adding to this. We're talking about the policy measures now rather than the general cost environment. We have additional days leave. We have statutory sick pay proposals. We have significant increases in minimum wage towards living wage. We have the introduction of universal pensions. All of those on their own have considerable merit, and the vast majority of them we support. So it is really important that we have those supports in our economy done in the right way, that we are protecting workers in the right way. 2 challenges we have. One is that cost burden, which we estimate to be 9% of labour cost on average, is predominantly going to hit the small and medium businesses. Most of our larger companies, they have sick pay schemes, they have pensions. They're not going to have a high share of minimum wage workers. But SMEs, on the other hand, are going to be significantly exposed. And the challenge we have is that all of those measures now are being introduced in a very concentrated window. So hence, when we have significant wage pressure, we have costs increasing, we have policy measures that are adding considerably to the cost of doing business and the cost of employment, but crucially, disproportionately on that SME economy. That's the core of our concern. What we think we need to do, as I mentioned, we have a surplus in the National Training Fund touching 1 billion, most likely this year. The latest numbers we had for last year was just short of 900 million, heading towards 2 billion by 2025. To us, it seems unconscionable that this is employers' money that's going into a National Training Fund that we can't seem to spend. Our suggestion is we'd find a way to alleviate the pressure on that SME community, help them with the transition, because we actually want those measures in our economy and in our labour market, but help them with the transition because when it all comes together, it's far too much and it will sink many. Secondly, let's get that money out to those businesses and particularly those SMEs in the form of training vouchers to support productivity. It seems such a missed opportunity that we're accumulating the surplus while we have such skill shortages, we have productivity challenges, we have competitiveness challenges, and we need to do much more on upskilling. So I would love to see the committee put some focus on that National Training Fund, where that surplus is going and how we can put it work for the economy, for the vulnerable employers, but crucially for employees that need training.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, and I'm taken by it. I'm sure the Chair is and other members as well. And if we've time before the budget, I'm sure we'll look at it. I think the reduction in the investment by foreign investment funds and pension funds in property in Ireland is a good thing. You're not dealing with constituents. I think they've had a really, this isn't the forum for it, but a really negative impact on the availability of houses, of rental prices and of accommodation in Ireland, and the model needs to be reset. So I don't share anybody's enthusiasm for it. There's another forum for that. As a director of IBEC, can you give us some, and I want to give 3.5 minutes to Neri, could you give us some concrete examples, flesh on the bones, of the calls IBEC is getting from companies in terms of the challenges they're facing? Just flesh some of them out rather than generalisations.
So I suppose on the energy issue, which is by far the most pressing at the moment, what we think reality will look like for many businesses is reduced operating times, reduced shifts, reduced production. For many organisations, it simply will not be viable to continue to produce at those energy costs.
In what particular areas do you know?
Well, obviously, look, anything that's going to be a production, manufacturing oriented with high energy content, building materials, heavy engineering, large goods production. Food obviously has a high energy cost, but given the nature of food production, production by and large will have to continue unless a business is facing absolute failure. But in other industries, we would expect to see reduced hours, reduced shifts and reduced production time. We are going to see this in the coming weeks and months. Our members will say to us that they simply cannot continue to run their production processes at those level of energy costs.
Could they with assistance?
Yes, they could, and I think what's crucial as well is we are going to see falling demand. The international downturn is going to mean that some of these businesses will have less demand for their products. Right? That's going to be the reality of what we're going to face, particularly in terms of the international economy. And I think it's really important where companies are looking to reduce production levels that their workers are supported, particularly around short-time working schemes. If we do have to go to 3-day working scheme, 3-day working and 3-day production, companies are not going to be building heavy stocks at these type of energy costs. You know, they will be probably operating to a much lower production schedule. But if we do have to face reduced production hours, employees and businesses will need to be supported so that they can come out of this when energy costs normalise.
Neri, less time than I thought I would. Thank you. A couple of points you make there. One or two that I disagree is your assumption that higher income households have generally built up significant savings. Have you evidence for that? Like, what is a higher income household now? Put a figure on it.
Well, it's subjective as to what counts as higher income, but the central bank data suggests that household savings have increased dramatically over the last 2 years. Now, they will. That will not continue. But I suppose the point we're making is that the crisis is qualitatively different for low-income households versus high-income households, and therefore the focus during an emergency should be on protecting households, on top of the household side now, rather than the business side, from poverty and deprivation, and that should therefore take priority. Just on Fergal's points as well, we would agree in terms of National Training Fund, education, childcare, all of those type of measures as well. We've repeatedly emphasised them. We're not doing enough in any of those areas. We're not maximising our growth or our employment opportunities, our productivity opportunities. We haven't been doing that, and we would certainly support usage of that money for training and upskilling as well.
I mean, would have been harping on apprenticeships since 2014, but yeah, we're at full employment. Like, there's an issue, right? We're almost at full employment. And he can play a role even in the schools. We're hung up still on university education in this country and left apprenticeships behind. In the UK, they're way ahead of us, where they kind of had a commission set up a number of years ago whose ambition was that every family would consider an apprenticeship for their child. Now, whether they followed through on it was another thing, but just as they'd consider college. There's points of agreement between the three presenters today about the targeting of measures, okay? It's not a thing that IBEC would necessarily be commenting on, but IFAC, yes, all right. You share that. Do you want to flesh, that's my very final question, do you want to flesh that out a little bit more? We went into a little bit more detail with the other two on that.
Well, yeah, to fully offset the cost of inflation for all households and indeed business would take you beyond the scope, probably would take you beyond the scope of what's reasonable in a single year. Therefore, a certain degree of targeting is necessary. And I suppose the point we're saying is, yes, there is a cost of living crisis for some parts of the population, and therefore those parts of the population should be the first priority. Not every cohort in society is experiencing a cost of living crisis. From a qualitative point of view, yes, their disposable income is going to fall. Their wages may not catch up. Their property income may not match inflation in some cases.
Put a figure on, we'll say pension increase.
A pension increase. As to what it should be? Well, our view from the opening statement is that the pension increase should broadly fall in line with inflation, and which our current figure, and it's evolving very quickly at the moment, and has been for the last 6 months, or even 9 or 12 months, is over 8% this year and around 4% next year. So that's a cumulative 12%. Obviously, there was an increase last year. So broadly, that's what we're talking about. Now, obviously, if you do cost of living, if you do once-off measures on the energy side, then that opens up scope for maybe doing slightly less in terms of cash payments. But our initial position is that the cash payments, dealing with the income adequacy side, it should be the first port of call in dealing with a cost of living crisis, rather than necessarily interfering with a market. Though my colleague Paul here is doing his PhD on carbon lock-in, so he may have stuff. He may have points to make on energy, but broadly that would be our sense of the first policy response, not the only policy response, but certainly the first one.
Carbon lock-in
on the household side.
Is it dependency on carbon? Is it fuel?
Debbie Lahart, I might ask you to answer quickly. Although
sure.
I think we all want to hear about this PhD, but I have to get to the next speaker. Go ahead.
The idea would be that essentially history matters, and you can make decisions that kind of have unintended consequences that narrow your choices going forward. So the concern for carbon infrastructures would be, should we take choices now in the short term that may make sense? They may not be consistent with longer term plans. So we have to be very careful about constructing expensive new infrastructures that we may have to, for example, subsequently decommission. That would be the kind of idea.
For example?
LNG. Okay.
Potentially, yes.
Now, if you made the briefest contribution, then you're going to get the biggest headline. Thank you.
Quite
Thanks,
right,
they were
too.
Very interesting contribution. Appreciate it.
Everybody on tenterhooks for the publication of this PhD. No pressure now.
Okay.